the character of the leadership that each man will bring to this job. Because as I said, I've had a ringside seat. The first of these, a lot's been talked about. And God loved Jennifer Granholm. Wasn't she great? Wasn't she great? I love Jennifer. But the first story I want to talk to you about is the rescue of the automobile industry. And let me tell you from this man's ringside seat, let me tell you about how Barack Obama saved more than 1 million American jobs. In the first days, literally the first days that we took office, General Motors and Chrysler were literally on the verge of liquidation. If the president didn't act, if he didn't act immediately, there wouldn't be any industry left to save. So we sat hour after hour in the Oval Office. Michelle remembers how what he must have thought when he came back upstairs. We sat hour after hour. We listened to senators, congressmen, outside advisors, even some of our own advisors. We listened to them to say some of the following things. They said, well, we shouldn't step up. The risks were too high. The outcome was too uncertain. And the president, he patiently sat there and he listened. But he didn't see it the way they did. He understood something they didn't get, and one of the reasons I love him. He understood that this wasn't just about cars. It was about the people who built and made those cars, and about the America those people built. In those meetings, I often thought about my dad. My dad was an automobile man. He would have been one of those guys all the way down the line, not on the factory floor, not along the supply chain, but one of those guys who were selling American cars to American people. I thought about what this crisis would have meant for the mechanics and the secretaries and the salespeople who my dad managed for over 35 years. And I know for certain that my dad, were he here today, he'd be fighting like heck for the president, because the president fought to save the jobs of those people my dad cared so much about. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad respected Barack Obama, would have respected Barack Obama had he been around, for having had the guts to stand up for the automobile industry when so many others just were prepared to walk away. You know, when I look back on the president's decision, I think of another son, automobile man, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney grew up in Detroit. My dad managed, his dad ran an entire automobile company, American Motors. Yes, what I don't understand is, in spite of that, he was willing to let Detroit go bankrupt. Look, I don't think he's a bad guy. No, I don't think he's a bad guy. I'm sure he grew up loving cars as much as I did. But what I don't understand, what I don't think he understood, that saving the automobile worker, saving the industry, what it meant to all of America, not just auto workers. I think he saw it the Bain way. Now, I mean this sincerely. I think he saw it in terms of balance sheets and write-offs. Folks, the Bain way may bring your firm the highest profits, but it's not the way to lead our country from the highest office. When things hung in the balance, I mean literally hung in the balance, the president understood this was about a lot more than the automobile industry. This was about restoring America's pride. He understood in his gut what it would mean to leave 1 million people without hope or work if he didn't act. And he intuitively understood the message it would have sent around the world if the United States gave up on an industry that helped put America on the map in the first place. Conviction, resolve, Barack Obama. That's what saved the automobile industry. Conviction, resolve, Barack Obama. Look, you heard my friend John Kerry. This president has shown the same resolve, the same steady hand in his role as commander-in-chief. Look, which brings me to the next illustration I want to tell you about, the next crisis he had to face. In 2008, before he was president, Barack Obama made a promise to the American people. He said, if we have bin Laden in our sights, we will take him out. He went on to say, that has to be our biggest national security priority. Look, Barack understood that the search for bin Laden was about a lot more than taking a monstrous leader off the battlefield. It was about so much more than that. It was about righting an unspeakable wrong. It was about healing an unbearable wound, a nearly unbearable wound in America's heart. And he also knew the message we had to send around the world. If you attack innocent Americans, we will follow you to the end of the earth. Look, most of all, President Obama had an unyielding faith in the capacity and the capability of our special forces. Literally the finest warriors in the history of the world. The finest warriors in the history of the world. So we sat originally, only 5 of us. We sat in the situation we were beginning in the fall of the year before. We listened, we talked, we heard, and he listened to the risks and reservations about the raid. He asked again the tough questions. He listened to the doubts that were expressed. But when Admiral McCraven looked him in the eye and said, "Sir, we can get this job done," I sit next to him. I looked at your husband, and I knew at that moment he had made his decision. And his response was decisive. He said, "Do it," and justice was done. Folks, Governor Romney didn't see things that way. When he was asked about bin Laden in 2007, here's what he said. He said, "It's not worth moving heaven and earth and spending billions of dollars just to catch one person." But he was wrong. He was wrong. Because if you understood that America's heart had to be healed, you would have done exactly what the president did, and you would move heaven and earth to hunt him down and to bring him to justice. Look, 4 years ago, 4 years ago, only thing missing at this convention this year is my mom. 4 years ago, my mom was still with us, sitting up in the stadium in Denver. I quoted her, one of her favorite expressions. She used to say to all her children, she said, "Joey, bravery resides in every heart, and the time will come when it must be summoned." Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you what I think you already know, but I watch it up close. Bravery resides in the heart of Barack Obama, and time again, I witnessed him summon it. This man has courage in his soul, compassion in his heart, and a spine of steel. And because of all the actions he took, because of the calls he made, because of the determination of American workers and the unparalleled bravery of our special forces, we can now proudly say what you've heard me say the last 6 months. Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. That's right. One man. We know we have more work to do. We know we're not there yet. But not a day has gone by in the last 4 years when I haven't been grateful as an American that Barack Obama is our president, because he always has the courage to make the tough decision. Speaking of tough decisions, speaking of tough calls, last week we heard at the Republican convention, we heard our opponents, we heard them pledge that they too had the courage to make the tough calls. That's what they said. But folks, in case you didn't notice, and I say to my fellow Americans, in case you didn't notice, they didn't have the courage to tell you what calls they'd make. They never mentioned any of that. Mrs. Robinson, you watched from home, I guess, from the White House. You heard them talk so much about how they cared so much about Medicare, how much they wanted to preserve it. That's what they told you. But let's look at what they didn't tell you. What they didn't tell you is that the plan they have already put down on paper would immediately cut benefits from more than 30 million seniors already on Medicare. What they didn't tell you is the plan they're proposing would cause Medicare to go bankrupt by 2016. And what they really didn't tell you is if you want to know, they're not for preserving Medicare at all. They're for a new plan. It's called voucher care.